Hey folks, welcome back to Only the Best Fantasy Novels. My name is Robin, and today I want to talk about Arcanum Unbounded, the first Cosmere short fiction collection we've had from Sanderson. It contains everything he's released to date, with the exception of Dawn Shard, the novella that takes place between Oathbringer and Rhythm of War, at the time of this recording at least. You can find everything here, and Dawn Shard is a separate novella. In addition to collecting all the short fiction he's written to date, he has I kind of like how the book is structured. Like, the stories are grouped in terms of the solar system the star system that they're part of. So, for example, in the Cellar system, we have the stories based around Elantris. So, which at this time is just the Emperor's Soul and the Hope of Elantris. And then, in addition to that, like, we get these we just get like these basically extracts of just some lore regarding each star system, as written by Chris, who is the one of the more scholarly warlockers we've seen in the world to date. And of course, because this just being a rehash of everything he's released to date would probably suck, it includes one novella that was written specifically for this volume, and that's Edge Dancer, which is a novella that takes place between Words of Radiance and Oathbringer in terms of chronology. So, is this collection, does it even make sense to like pick up this collection and read it if you're uninterested in short fiction or so? I'll kind of go through it, but I'm not gonna waste time going through each individual story. Given the fact that the book is structured in based on star system, I'll just go through based on star system. Otherwise, this video would take far much more time than I'm willing to spend on it. Yeah. So, the first system, like I mentioned, is the Cellar system. So this is a star system where Elantris takes place. And this is really just two stories. The first is the Emperor's Soul, which is the novella that it introduces us to a different part of the world than we've seen in Elantris. It introduces like a whole new magic system and all of that. And most importantly, it introduces a character that we do see crop up later on in another series with a pretty prominent role. I'll leave that to you to figure out. It wasn't something that I could guess offhand until I googled it personally. I'm not that much of a Sanderson scholar. Yeah, like for me, reading back this novella, it was pretty fun. Like, it's something I tend to disregard. I well, not disregard, but like, I didn't think too much on. But after rereading it, it was pretty interesting, given just some of the themes that Sanderson delves into in terms of identity and these kind of things. It was a very interesting read. And then we have the short story, The Hope of Elantris, which honestly is just a different POV of some of the events that happened at the end of Elantris. And it's really just a kind of short story / vignette that you wrote for a fan, basically, based on the postscript. Oh, that's the other thing. Each story in here, or each novella, whatever it is, it has a postscript from him where he talks a little bit about like the inspiration, or just gives us a little bit of trivia related to whatever you wrote. But anyway, that's regarding the Cellar system. The next system that we delve into is the Scadrian system, which is the setting for the Mistborn books. And this really comprises of 3 pieces of fiction. The first is the 11th Metal, which is just a short story that it gives us a sneak peek into the time when, shortly after Kelsier got his allomancy abilities, and when he was learning how to be a Mistborn, that period in time. And it shows us him on a mission where he discovers the 11th Metal that plays such a prominent role in the original Mistborn trilogy. And Sanderson gives us just gives us some backstory on how the story even came to be. It was interesting, but fine, whatever. Not really important to read or anything. The next story we get is Allomancer Jack and the Pits of Eltania, which is set in the second Mistborn era. And it gives us an adventure of Allomancer Jack, who is just this blowhard who imitates who writes these gentleman adventure fiction throughout the course of the new era of Mistborn novels, and he's yeah. Anyway, what I find interesting about this novella is that it answers one of my questions pertaining to that era of Mistborn, where we see the evolution of one of the races of Scadrial from and they're very different from what we saw of that race in the initial Mistborn trilogy. Like, I couldn't understand how we transitioned from one to the other, how it would even work. This novella does a good job of just delving into that. So that was fascinating by itself, but not exactly critical reading. Like, I didn't know anything about this before, and it certainly didn't impact my reading of the second era Mistborn novels. And then the third novella is probably one of the most important novellas you need to read, where it comes to this whole short fiction thing, and it's Mistborn Secret History. It has to be read after the end of Bands of Mourning, which is the sixth Mistborn book, and it takes place, and it's in the second era of novels. But Mistborn Secret History, it takes place during the original trilogy, and it gives us some interesting insight into some of the some of the events that were going on in the background of Mistborn, and some things that were never explained. They're all explained here, and it's very important to read that particular novella because it has ramifications straight through to everything, to like Stormlight Archive and everything. So it's a must read. So yeah, moving on, after the Scadrian system, we have the Tal'Dain system, and honestly, this is just one piece of fiction. It's it's a few pages of the White Sand prose novel, the initial version that he wrote back in 1999 or whatever it was. I say the initial version because he has plans to write White Sand as a prose novel. It's currently available. You can probably see it up on my shelf as a graphic novel, and this story, like, you could completely ignore this one. Honestly, it's literally a rehashing of whatever happens in White Sand, the graphic novel, tit for tat. No additional context, no new insight, nothing. Everything in this story is contained in the graphic novel, so you could just bounce clean past this. And I suspect that when we get the actual White Sand prose novel, like, this won't even be, we'll see a very dramatic difference between this and what gets released as the quote-unquote official version, whatever you want to call it. The fourth system that we're going into is the Trinidite system, and that's just the novella Shadows for Silence in the Forests of Hell. And this was initially conceptualized just as a novella that he wrote when he got an invitation from George R.R. Martin to contribute to one of his anthologies, but it evolved into its own thing and became like one of the quote-unquote core worlds that has cosmic implications, and we do get a little taste of it in future books, in other things that are mentioned here and there, but it's not like super critical to read this. You can pretty much infer everything you need to know about this from what we see in the other in the other books and so. But it's interesting, like Emperor's Soul. It's interesting. It provides a little additional context, and it's a novella. So if you want to dive into it, sure. The second to last system that we contain in this edition of the Arcanum Unbounded is the Dromonad system, and this is just the novella Sixth of the Dusk. And this novella is it's pretty fun because it's Sanderson's take on the Prime Directive of you have this, like, quote unquote pristine world where you have, as much as you have these visitors from another planet, they're trying as little as possible to, ostensibly they're trying as little as possible to not their supposed goal, I should say, is to not affect the technological advancement of the native population. But of course, there's always more than meets the eye, and this novella was just really interesting. I think honestly it's among one of the more creative stories that Sanderson has written, just in terms of how out there the imagination gets. It's pretty interesting. It's definitely worth reading, and it does have like at the time of the time that I'm recording this, there's an upcoming novella sequel to it, Isles of the Amber Dark, and it based on what we've seen of that novella so far, it's something that's definitely gonna have like larger cosmic implications. So this one is also a must read. But yeah, and then the final system is the Rosharan system, and for this section, there's really just one novella. The new novella that was written specifically for this collection, Edge Dancer. And Edge Dancer was an important novella. Like, you could probably get by with not reading it. Honestly, I don't recommend it because it does a few important things. It introduces us to a character who comes to have a little more prominent role in the moving forward from Oathbringer and in Rhythm of War. It introduces us to a new faction, a new political faction in the Rosharan conflict. And it also introduces us to yet a separate faction who has a stake in this. And this particular faction is extremely mysterious. There's very little known about them. And this introduction does set the stage for the expanded view that we get in the other novella that's set in between the Stormlight Archive that's not part of this collection, Dawnshard. So with all of that, I think this is pretty much a must read. But regarding the collection as a whole, like, is it worth like picking up and reading? Yes and no. Like, if you've read most of the most important novellas in here, which is like Miss Morn's Secret History, Shouts for Silence, and Emperor's Soul, and Edge Dancer, because these things have all been released separately or published elsewhere, then you can probably just get by with just ignoring this collection. If you're a completionist, you'll want to read it. If you're like fascinated by the little tidbits and all of that, it's an okay time. It's an interesting time, and it just goes to show. It just gives us a little bit more context to play with this whole crazy cosmic concept that Sanderson has going. But yeah, it's fun. Like, me personally, I bought it, I read it, I don't regret it. Even though I'd read most of these stories before. And yeah, that's kind of my take on Arcanum Unbounded. An okay collection. Like, I'll probably, whenever Volume 2 comes out, when he puts together, short fiction, I'll probably get that. But yeah, I think that's all I have to say really about this book. If you've made it this far into the video, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.